Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to our panel. It's called How to Tour in 2023 Without Going Broke. I don't know if we have a definitive answer to that quandary, but we are going to do our best. My name is Dan Mangan. I cut my teeth as an artist, but I'm kind of here in the capacity of a company that I co-founded called Side Door. Side Door is sort of like marketplace for the arts where any space is a venue. So living rooms, warehouses, garages, gazebos, curling rinks, you name it. Connect with artists, build shows together, share the revenue. And it's about, trying to build sort of decentralized live entertainment ecosystem where artists can make a living even if they're not famous. That's sort of the principle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce these folks. I'm going to get them to each speak a bit about themselves, and then we'll kind of dive into some prompts that I have created here. Let's start with Peggy.
Thanks, Dan. Hello, I'm Peggy Hogan. I am a recording artist. Contrary to my outfit, I am in hip hop, and my artist name is Hua Li. I'm also the marketing and label manager for Next Door Records, which is a lovely indie label based in Toronto, Canada.
Great. Thank you. Evan?
I'm Evan. I go by Aysanabee. I'm a First Nations singer-songwriter from Sandy Lake First Nation. I guess my music career kind of started through the pandemic, so I guess I'm kind of my experience in touring will be like shorter, but still somewhat interesting. So since my career started,
A very valid perspective at this moment, I think, for artists. Great.
What's up, everybody? I'm Andrew Leib. I'm an artist manager from Los Angeles. Work at a company called Red Light Management. Been managing artists for almost 15 years. Worked with folks that are doing, multi-million-dollar tours, and have also slept on a floor in a kitchen once on tour. So I've seen it from a bunch of different angles, and stoked to be here.
One of my favorite touring memories is sleeping on a floor in a Bart Simpson sleeping bag. It was just like the only thing that was around. That was a moment. Well, maybe as a manager, Andrew, I'm curious, what is the lay of the land these days? And what do touring costs look like at the moment, maybe compared to pre-pandemic or just in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the stuff that we deal with day to day, right? So gas is clearly more expensive, which has affected everything. I do feel like flights are cheaper, and so I've been using that to our advantage. Yeah, I mean, venue costs, across the board and all that stuff that you're hearing about, AEG and Live Nation venues, that's had a real effect on people and their touring. And yeah, there's just less, we lost a lot during the pandemic, whether it was venues or promoters or artists or people. And that took a real toll too. So yeah, I mean, everything's more expensive, and I think just touring intentionally is just the name of the game more so these days than ever before. I mean, to go into like the specifics of the things that, obviously it might be tough. But generally, yeah, I mean, stuff is just more expensive, and you have to be really intentional about what you decide to do. Not to say that it's not always worth it. You just have to really look at it and think about what might be worth doing an endeavor through.
That's great. I also wanted to say, I should have said this off the top, but we would love it if this became a conversation. And so if you guys, and we're not going to wait till the end for questions. If you have something you want to add or a question, just please raise your hand and we'll kind of bring you into the fold here. Do you think that like as AEG, Live Nation, kind of like throughout the pandemic, seems like they seized more power, more control of the ecosystem, that trickles down, and like, how has that affected the, like, I mean, are there artists in the room? Some hands up. Great. I mean, I think that often so by like a lot of the panels are sort of like talking about like the high tier stuff, which is great for the industry, but the artists in the room are often sort of like, okay, but what about me? How does this relate to, small clubs and stuff like that. And like, how do you guys figure, like, how has that trickled down to small and medium-sized clubs? Like, I've been noticing that not only are there fewer of those clubs to play, but also the clubs that have survived through the pandemic have like tightened the purse strings, and they're charging more per use, or, you know, they have to cover their costs in a different way before you make any money, or they're making you buy tickets to your own show to then resell and stuff like that. It seems like in general, the traditional model is a bit harder, but that's, anyone, Peggy, do you have any thoughts on any of that?
I do. It's interesting because part of the way that Live Nation has tightened their grip is that they have bought a lot of kind of medium-sized promoters. And so there are like rooms that are not that big, like under 1,000, that technically, if you go up the chain, are owned by Live Nation, which definitely severely impacts the indie scene in a lot of cities. A lot of the smaller cap venues now are more oriented toward bigger touring acts than, you know, like bringing local talent into their rooms. Additionally, I think there are just so few really small rooms, like 50 to 200 cap rooms, that survived the pandemic. So there's not a lot of places for emerging artists to really cut their teeth and even get into the like 200 to 1,000 cap room as support or whatever else. So I think it's a really interesting kind of rocky moment right now for emerging artists. You know, but I think I'm over 30 now, so it's not for me to start a DIY venue anymore. I'm interested in seeing like what Gen Z is doing in terms of creating those spaces for themselves. I also want to mention, when it comes to touring costs, I want to earmark some of the kind of like hidden costs of touring. Like we talk a lot about, especially in Canada, the P2 visa and the cost of gas, like those more kind of tangible costs of touring.
Too.
Absolutely.
It seems like it's double what it used to be for
right.
a hotel room.
Yeah. On top of that, I think, especially from an intersectional perspective, there are so many hidden costs of touring. Like, you know, I'm really lucky that I've been able to get in the car with like boys that I trust, and I'm like often moving through spaces with like a group of men. So as a woman, I feel a lot safer. But then also, you know, it's expensive to bring players with me. So I often do also go on the road solo, and then I'm navigating cities and spaces that I'm not necessarily familiar with. So there's sometimes an emotional impact. I don't always necessarily feel safe walking through cities alone as a racialized woman. So there's this kind of hidden impact. Like if I like suffer an attack or something and I have to go to therapy for 6 months, like that's like also a cost of touring, you know? So I think there's a lot of kind of, you know, underneath the budget kind of costs as well that are part of this whole ecosystem. And we need to figure out ways to kind of like create a safer vibe so that people have the opportunity to either bring a team with them or, you know, figure out how to be safe.
I mean, I think one thing you're speaking to is like finding your community in each of those pockets. It's interesting with Side Door, we actually had an artist come to us, Hayfitz, and he was saying how his experience when he played a space that was like specifically, you know, a openly and aggressively safe space for queer people, that he just felt so much more at ease, you know? And so that was like the beginning. We had started this initiative of like safer spaces, and you can get like a little badge and stuff like that. And I think that helping people, and more than ever, like the traditional funnel of how shows got booked, it's like, it's really serving the top 3%, and everyone else is sort of getting kicked out of the funnel. And so I think that, like, you know, the solutions that we need to look for now is like, how do we serve that other 97%? You know, how do we serve the folks who, you know, the idea of playing 1,000 capacity theater is like, you know, seems like a million years away. The folks that are trying to sell like 30 tickets or 80 tickets in, you know, the next town kind of thing, touring regionally, you know, finding your way to It's a tricky time. I'd be curious. So, Aysanabee, by the way, I was at the Juno Awards, kind of like the Canadian Grammys over the weekend. Aysanabee brought the house down on the big TV broadcast. Huge moment, very moving. But Evan, your career has kind of come to prominence through the pandemic. Correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't tour much before the pandemic.
No. I set up shows at bar gigs, and my friends would come.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. So tell me about so you've really only kind of started touring post-pandemic in the last year or so. Can you talk a bit about your experience in the last year? What's it looked like for you?
Yeah, I think we played like 184 shows in the last year, and so we did everything from small to some of the largest festivals in Canada. And, I did my first like headline tour recently and out west, and I'd never been out there before, and we managed to almost kind of sell it out. And I was like my own.
It's very different than my first.
Well, it's
7 people average. Yeah.
But I went by myself. I was my own driver, my own merch person, my own everything, and I couldn't bring the band out, so I either play solo or with a 7-piece band. So I went solo, and that's why I was able to kind of, I guess, turn a profit. I guess merch really helps, but also, I think for being an emerging artist as well, I got to do that and made some money, but then I played one of the biggest festivals in Canada and lost thousands of dollars because yeah, and they'll be like, an emerging artist just wants, so they're like, the exposure will be good, and it was, but that's that whole kind of.
I think artists who bought a ticket to come to Austin could probably relate.
Yeah.
It's it's an investment in yourself. It's sort of a lost leader just to be here and to meet people and to hopefully be seen, etc.
But I would recommend these conferences, though. I wish someone told me about conferences when I was still playing music, pre-pandemic, because I set up so many of these bar gigs hoping someone would walk through the door, and then I played a few of the smaller conferences, and then you're playing to a room full of those people, and that kind of led to me getting so many of these festival gigs.
And one thing you said, which goes back to what Andrew was saying, is being very intentional about how you tour, and the fact that you had these shows. Amazing that they were full, and that's probably because of social presence and the momentum that you've had in the last while. But you still did it. You drove yourself, no tour manager, no front of house. You were just using the house techs. You were selling your own merch. Did you have a seller, a helper throughout the night, or were you kind of at the merch table all night? When you weren't playing?
Actually, in Vancouver, our mutual friends kind of took over, which was really nice. But usually I just pop over to the table.
Because that takes a toll too. Like going and selling, trying to sell your own merch and sign stuff maybe, and after the show, and you're talking, and there's music on in the house now, and you're chit chatting, and you're worried about your voice for the next night, and you're talking over music, and you're talking to folks. All of it, basically everything in this world, it seems costs either time or money, or existential spirituals like chi, and it's so when you have to be your own everything, it's hard to really focus just on the show because you're thinking about all of the logistics around it. But I think that speaks to being intentional, figuring out how much of this burden can I take on myself.
Yeah, I've learned a lot through kind of the new creator economy, and you think of websites like Fiverr and these sites where you can pay for a very specific, it's almost like paying for a little widget, of a task. And I think that there's only so much of that can be applied in the physical space without hiring somebody. But there are certain things that you can do to make your life easier, automate, hire someone to do one very specific thing for a certain amount of money, that it's much cheaper than having kind of a catch-all Swiss Army knife on the road. One of the things that I found helpful for my client that just went out, she might say differently, honestly, but we did remote tour management, which I thought was really, really helpful. So instead of you advancing the entire run, talking to all the venues, handling the correspondence, hiring a tour manager who's out there with you, whatever, well, that's amazing. Sometimes just paying these touring professionals to be like, can you remote advance the show? Do what you do, just don't be on site. And that ends up freeing a lot of space. And so this is what I'm talking about with like this kind of widget, that you can hire people for these very specific gigs, remotely and otherwise. And I found that to be super helpful. And yeah, it would have been nice to have someone out on the road, but like, yeah, that extra hotel room, that extra seat on the plane, the extra whatever adds up really quickly. And until you can truly justify that person being there, it might make sense to just hire someone out to do something remotely for a very specific purpose.
I mean, I think that was one of the things I was going to ask, and you kind of touched on it, is like, there must be some silver linings to touring post-pandemic. One is, there's never been more affordable online tools that can help you manage your time and space, et cetera. Are there anything else that comes to mind? I mean, I have some, but I want to hear from you guys first. Is there anything in terms of like, what are the silver linings of touring now? What has changed in the pandemic? There must be some things that are better. It can't all be bad.
I feel like I'm the naysayer on this panel, and I I think it's all pretty bad right now. That being said, we were talking about Substack just before coming on stage. And there are some really interesting things happening online now, like as a result of the pandemic. There's really a lot of kind of like it feels like the indie scene that I used to be really committed to as a kid is now like, if you want to find those underground communities, they're in Discord, they're on Substack. There's some really interesting conversations happening there, and I think those platforms are building actual real fans that will come to shows, as opposed to, what we've been talking about for years now in the industry, where it's like, oh, this person's streaming numbers are so high, but there's no one coming to their shows, or this person has 1 billion TikTok followers, but they only sold 5 tickets. What's going on here, So when you're creating an online community in these kind of more closed ecosystems, like the so-called dark forest of the internet, those are people that are like really trying to seek you out. And I think that stuff happened basically as a result of the pandemic, that there wasn't this opportunity for real life getting together as like a scene of people passionate about a certain artist or a certain topic. So that's interesting. I'm really interested in how that will impact touring and the reach that artists have to really, really dedicated fans. Beyond that, I don't know. I'm curious to hear about some silver linings too, because I don't want to harp on the P2 visa, but in Canada, like, we're about to be iced out of the US.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but the American government's can basically double or triple the cost of a visa for international bands, which means you're going to get a lot fewer Canadian bands in the US. It's really dumb. And the troubling thing is that it's locking out the bands that were having trouble paying $800 for a visa in the first place. Like, you know what I mean? It's not going to affect the bands that like, oh, some staffer got us our visa. It's really hurting the very bands that need the help the most.
It's about to double, and it's $800 US. It's going to be
per person,
right? It's going to be over $1,000 US. Our Canadian dollar is not that strong, so that's many thousands for us. So please, there's a forum online. You can write Homeland Security and advocate for international artists. We would love to come and play your lovely country.
I can lay out some silver linings, and I can be the yay sayer on this panel. We can have 2 different perspectives. I think there's never been more data at your fingertips for free. It's like incredible. We build these audiences on all these different platforms, and while sometimes it's not the most accurate and reflective of the people that will actually show up to a gig, it's definitely a start. And it's never been more robust. There's never been more ways to reflect on that. And that's really, when we talk about intentionality, that's a good step forward, And I think that realistically, the model of touring just to tour, while it's like really romantic and sounds fun, was a really shitty business model. And so touring intentionally means that like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't go to Texas or South by for that matter, unless I really have a purpose to go. And, you know, that led to burnout, right? If you didn't have a purpose to go somewhere and 4 people came to your show and you came back from tour and lost a bunch of money, like, yeah, sure, it sounded romantic and your buddies did it or whatever, but you like lost a bunch of money and now you're kind of burnt out on it. And so this idea of like intentionality and that being silver lining, a new perspective, like, okay, I'm not going to this place until I know that I have a valid reason to go, that I'm going to collaborate with this band, that I'm playing in front of this person, that I can draw 100 people, whatever. And, you know, I think that's a huge part of it. And going back to community, which like I'm a huge proponent of community, and that's led me to like many incredible places in my career. It's just like relationships and community. I feel like after the pandemic, we were all craving that. And a lot of stuff, Substack and Discord and all these things, like online communities started. That's because people were craving connection, which is ultimately what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I think that, you know, we're all, there are people as artists, a lot of the time you guys have those skill sets to be able to build community, to start community. You do it online and then you realize it in person or whatever it might be. And, you know, this is the time to flex, you know, like everyone is craving this connection. Everyone's kind of looking to these large entities being like, hey, didn't you guys have this figured out? They didn't. So how do I take this, you know, control in my own control, using these tools, largely free, to get people to come together and come to your shows, and that will start a new wave of stuff. And so I think a silver lining is just like, you know, feeling hopefully invigorated, and like hopefully the pandemic, while it was damaging in a lot of ways, hopefully it was a bit like a slingshot, and you're now letting go and really starting to like realize this stuff in real life and apply it. And to me that's been incredible. Just like, I don't know, I could do a show through, you know, whatever, typical touring gig, or we can set up a residency for a month and it's a show every Monday, and, you know, there's a hang afterwards, and all of a sudden that then translates into your biggest headline show, whatever, you know. So it's like just taking stuff in your own hands has been incredibly empowering to me. And I can understand that that's not everyone's energy and vibe, but to me, that's how it's landed. It's just like, no one else is going to do it. I got to do it myself. I got to make the call, you know, and that's been, really effective for me.
I think that there's this like, this tendency to be like, okay, I have this train, it's parked at the station, and I know I've got this song and it's so good, and I've got this show and it's going to be great. As soon as everyone gets on the train, I'm going to press go and this train's going to move. And of course that never works. Nobody ever gets on a train that's stopped. It's like you have to feel like your train has to be moving. Doesn't matter how fast it's going. It could be barreling along. It could just be inching forward. But people want to get on a train that's moving. They want to get on a train that feels like it's going to move without them, unless they, like with or without them. And so although I do agree, you need to be intentional, and you do need to like know what you're getting into, and, you know, have expectations and set up your budgets in a way that's not, you're not going to go broke and burn out. You do kind of have to take a risk, don't you? Like you do, like even just being here for a lot of people is like a financial risk, but they're doing it because, and I feel like if you don't have that thing in you where it's like, I'm willing to be broke to do this, it's like, it probably won't work. Like you have to have that sort of naive audacity that people like you should be in front of 10,000 people and you deserve all of their attention on stage. Like you have to have that kind of, I don't know, sociopathic, artistic, you know, like kind of tendency. But I did want to say, in terms of silver linings, I have never been as fulfilled playing live shows as I've been post-pandemic. And maybe that's because of like the fear of it going away or whatever. But like,
I feel like it's, maybe don't, it's harder sometimes to sell tickets. I think people used to buy 4 tickets and then they would figure out who they were going to invite closer to the show date. Now they wait to the last minute, they buy 2. But you're like, the people who are there are leaning forward. They're not at the back with their arms crossed. They're just in it. And I feel like as an artist on stage, like I have never felt more connected to a room full of people as I have. And so for me, that's the big silver lining, is that like, I think the scarcity of shows and the scarcity of connection over the pandemic has made everybody in the room like take off their armor and just like get vulnerable and be there together and participate in that thing that's bigger than those some of the parts, and for me, I feel like, and I've said this before, but like, it doesn't matter how far you're kicking the ball, just kick it forward. Like the feeling of moving forward will give you enough sort of momentum and you can keep doing it. And so no matter, like I've been on tours that have lost money. Like I've gone on tour for weeks and come home with less money than I've got 2 kids. So I'm like, it's not great financially, but it has still given me, I didn't regret a thing. Like I came home and I was like, I'm still building this thing. It's still, and I put out 6 records. Like I've been doing this for 20 years. I have a great career. I'm very, very pleased and grateful for the career that I have. But I still want more. Like I still want to do more, and I still want to go more.
Yeah, I mean, this is the like balance. It's like the romantic nature of the road, which is so important to the artist's journey. How long can you do that and make sure that it's sustainable across the board, not just financially, but also just like emotionally, and just checking on yourself. And I think there is a way to do it where you're just like, okay, yeah, this tour's gonna be a wash, but if I get like 1 sync, it pays for the thing, so it makes sense. And I enjoyed myself, I connected with people. Yeah, I didn't make money, but like, I made it in another way or whatever. That can sometimes keep you balanced. But avoiding burnout is crucial. Yeah.
Peggy, you were going to say something.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with this point around trying to create momentum from within as an artist. There's nothing more demotivating than feeling kind of creatively and physically kind of stuck in a place. That being said, it is risky being an artist. Period. Point blank. Like I don't think, unless you're Beyonce, you're taking a lot of risks to move your career forward. While there is no, I don't think, tangible answer to how to tour without going broke, I think one of the ways to mitigate some of the risks as an artist is to really plan ahead. At the label, we offer tour support, and the number of times that artists come up to us like 2 days before going on the road being like, hey, here's a budget with our projected losses. And it's like, well, we're planning our budget months in advance, so we can't just pull this money out of our pocket right now. We're a broke label trying to make sure that you as a broke artist can do what you want to do. But if you come to us 3 to 6 months in advance, then we can look at, offsetting some of those losses in a more tangible way. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done if you give yourself a lot of time to plan your tours. Like, as soon as you start booking that first show, start thinking about, do I have friends in that city I can stay with? Like, how can I route this in a way that is going to save costs? Like, that's part of the intentionality of it as well. Like, not just picking the markets that you're going to, but being intentional about really like every step of the way. And then you'll also conserve energy and be happier on tour. So the more that you can plan ahead and be accountable for that stuff, the better you'll feel as an artist on the road and in your recovery after.
I also want to add to that, like when you are on the road, think about like, what do you want people to do? Like, let's say they discover you, they attended the show with a friend and they loved you. They thought you were great. They'd never heard of you before. What do you want them to do? How are you going to keep in touch with those people? Like, I was on tour in Europe in the fall, and this amazing artist that I love dearly was out. They didn't have any merch to sell, and they had no mailing list or anything, and they were blowing people's minds. And every night I was like, you should probably go out there and talk to those people, And they're like, well, I just don't have any merch. And I think that like you want to feel like you've got this like this cup, and you're out there, and like every time somebody finds you online or comes across a poster, you want to just be like adding people. It's like it's almost, I hate to talk in tech speak, but it's almost like it's a user base, right? And if you were running like a platform, like I've learned about this with Side Door, it's like, how do we bring users on, and then how do we retain those users? And some users will fall away, but the idea is that more come than leave, and then it's always growing. And I think that like if someone discovers you on Instagram, you obviously want them to follow your Instagram. But then if they make it to your profile page, what do you want them to do? For me, I want them to join my mailing list. Somebody is at a show and they post like an Instagram story of a clip of my show. I write them back and I say, hey, thank you so much for being there. And you can have saved responses in Instagram and stuff. And I say like, please consider joining my mailing list. Here's the link. Oh, and by the way, there's a big QR code behind the merch table. Like at all points, you just want to be catching people, because the end point is you want them to buy a ticket to 5 shows and bring all their friends and buy a bunch of t-shirts. That's like the amazing thing that could happen at the end of their user journey. But off the top, it's like they might just sort of hear you on their like release radar on Spotify. So what is the user flow? How do you get them from there to there? And people want art. They love art. It fulfills them. It makes them feel like life is worth living in many ways. Help them with an invitation at every step of the way to get a little bit closer to you, whether that's joining your mailing list. I use a platform called Community where I can like text people. I can like text like blast out texts and stuff. So at the shows, I say to people, I'm recording the show tonight. I get like my audio, the front house tech to like plug in like a Zoom recorder to the desk. And then I just like literally text people an MP3 of the show like a couple days later. And in doing so, they've texted me. Now I can text them back when I have a new single out and all that stuff. But you need to create a direct relationship with these people as quickly as possible. And in the moment that they are loving you is the best moment to grab them and bring them into the fold. Because the hardest thing is to go out on tour, coming back to intentionality, is to go on tour and feel like you came home and you're not sure. People said they loved you. It was amazing. You had this great experience and you met these other bands and you had a really good time, but you don't know, like, will they all forget you? And so the best thing you can do is try to retain a relationship with as many of those people as possible. And so it's not just about intentionality of how you're going to tour. I think it's probably cogent to tour regionally. If you live in a major city like LA or San Francisco or New York, like tour like within an hour and a half of your house so you can sleep in your own bed that night. You'd be amazed what you can do. I mean, that's what Side Door is about. It's about trying to find low overhead situations where you can play in alternative spaces. Most of our spaces, the hosts don't take any of the money. They just want it to go to the artist. So the artist is often taking like 90% of the gate. I think like there are many, many ways that you can find gigs outside of the traditional forum. And what's interesting is that when we started Side Door, we were worried that the existing industry would be like all mad at us. Like managers and agents would be like, what are you guys doing? You're breaking it. And the truth is that agents and managers have come to us saying, thank you, you're solving the problems that we already had. It's not just, the big players. I'm talking a lot. I should pass this off here. I guess, have you guys had experiences where you were able to, an unexpected win from a show? Like, I think, even coming to South by, playing a showcase, there's 12 people there, but one of them loves it and gives you their card and you keep in touch and they sync your song in a TV show or something like that. Have you guys had those experiences where some unexpected win came from doing something that wasn't necessarily rational to do in the first place?
Yeah, I think, like I said, those music conferences and the smaller ones I find are always kind of interesting because, yeah, like I got to play like folk music Ontario and we got maybe like 8 festivals out of it. And so, yeah, like I can't recommend getting yourself into those spaces and just making sure you prepare for the show. And because festival gigs do tend to pay a bit more.
But even so, like, as far as not going broke, I find myself playing a lot of them still solo. Can I play like free solo, and then that'll kind of afford to bring the band to one of the bigger ones. So yeah, music conferences. I can't say.
It sort of feels like you're playing poker and like
Yeah.
you keep doubling down. Like, you know, it's like any money that comes in, you just put it back into the pot, you know, and you're like, okay, but one day I'm going to cash in. You
Well,
know?
I never toured pre-pandemic, so I don't know how good it was back then or anything. So
I have many stories of like those silver bullet moments which you cannot anticipate, but they happen by showing up and just like increasing your odds by playing, being there. So that is an argument, of course, just to like be out there and tour. Yeah, I think I saw my friend Ralph walk in here. There he is. What's up, man? So this is a true story. I was at South by 7 years ago, and it was pouring rain. And I ran to the nearest hotel, which was the Hilton, and they were doing a show at the top floor. And so I just like ran in, saw music was in there. Of course, there was music in a hotel that I ran into. Went up to the top floor, elevator doors open. I'm immediately hit by this ridiculous voice. Just like a total like incredible singer-songwriter, crooner vibe. And he completely knocked me out. I didn't even get his name. And I ended up seeing a couple other bands. But I ended up looking on the list to the schedule and found it was this artist named Luke Wade. Does anyone know Luke Wade here? Cool. He was a contestant on The Voice, so he literally had the voice, you know. And I reached out to him and I was like, yo, I saw you at South by. That was incredible. I would love to just be friends. Like, you know, there was a time where I was, and still do, where I just like, if I dig something, I just reach out, you know, and there's even if it's just to make the connection. So Luke and I became friends, and he was kind of asking for advice and things like that. I eventually convinced him to move to LA. I was like, I think it's worth going into that next step. He moved to LA. We became friends. I never officially managed him, but I did introduce him to Ralph and Angry Mob Publishing, and he sent some songs. He was like, I was looking for a publishing deal, and he ended up locking a publishing deal. And that was completely just from like walking into a room.
I would hazard to say that that's exactly how anything happens. Yeah. You know, it's not just like that's how something happens. Like anyone in the industry wants to feel like they discovered you. And so it's like sometimes they discover you after ignoring 11 of your benevolent emails, of course. But sometimes like they want to walk into a venue at 2 a.m. and everyone is freaking out and they want to think to themselves, oh my God, I've missed out on this thing and I need to be a part of it. Like you need to have that sort of build it yourself. Nobody can, that's the other thing is that even if Coldplay's manager was like, I love you, you're going to be a star, kid. Like there's only so much they can do today. Like it has to come from you. It has to come from your ability to make people feel seen and heard and build community at the shows and like, you know, exude some undeniable, vulnerable part of yourself in your music. And you have to be willing to show up and be awesome all the time, basically, which is exhausting and financially difficult. But they will, when the industry finds you, it won't seem like a golden ticket. It'll seem like, oh yeah, now you want a piece. Okay, well, let's talk about it and let's figure it out. And then you want to enter those relationships with that leverage, knowing that you built it yourself, that you can maintain it yourself. They can help you grow the pie and make it bigger. But that like, if you go into any kind of industry relationship, like unleveraged so that you are basically hoping they return your call, it's not a good relationship. And that's not like not the best, it's not the good foot to be on. Sorry, Pete.
Of course. I wanted to share my silver bullet story because this is going to be a rare moment of optimism for me. I came to South by for the first time in 2018, and I was here as the touring DJ for an artist named Kata's Weapon in Canada.
Amazing.
Which was very fun. But one of the amazing things that happened as a result of coming to South by as basically backup musician, was that someone at one of our very empty showcases happened to see me DJing for Rolly. They were a publicist up in Toronto. And then 6 months later, I got an email from the contact form on my website being like, hey, I'm this artist, I'm coming to Montreal. I need a woman to DJ for me at a gig in Montreal. And I was like, well, this is really random. I wonder how this person found out about me. Turns out her publicist was at this show. And when she was like, I need someone to DJ for me, she was like, I saw this woman DJing for Cadence Weapon. You should hit her up through her contact form on her website. So this artist is named Reet. She's from Iqaluit, Nunavut. And working with Reet has been one of the most incredible experiences of my life. Like, I've gotten to go up to the Arctic multiple times. I always knew that music was going to help me travel a lot, but I never thought that I would go to the Arctic to play shows. Some of the best shows of my life. I played a show on like a glacier, basically. We've been to Dubai together. We've traveled all over the world, and it was something, obviously I didn't come to South by with Cadence Weapon thinking like, wow, I'm really gonna work some publicists here to get some more DJ gigs. So there are these moments that happen just because, you're on stage, you're invested, you look cute, you do your thing, and people see that energy and they respond to it. So I always say, like, even if there's 4 people in the room, you want to give best show of your life energy on stage. And I really try to commit to that. Even if I'm not personally feeling great before I get on stage, I really try to take that time to think like, okay, like these 4 people, they really deserve the best for me. They came out, it's probably awkward for them to stand in this empty room. Let me give my all to these people. Let me give them love in the way that I can as an artist, and hopefully, they'll tell 6 friends, and then next time there'll be 4 times 6 people in the room.
I've got a little trick that I do. I pretend that I have amnesia before I go on stage, and I pretend that I don't remember how hard I've worked. I don't remember how much I've worried or have been anxious about the show, or how many people would show up, or if we were going to sell merch or whatever. And I try. So you guys know this show Quantum Leap from the 80s? Anyone? Maybe some millennials and Gen Xers or something. But there's an episode of Quantum Leap where the guy wakes up and he's Elvis. And he's like, oh God. And someone's like, Elvis, get on stage. And he's like, oh my God, I'm Elvis. And I think like, what if you woke up and you walked on stage and the only thing you knew was your songs? And if there was 3 people there and they were interested in listening to you, you'd be like, sweet, like these people are listening to me play, this is great. And sort of approaching the stage with that sort of like childlike wonderment of like, whether there's 5 people or 500, I don't know what's gonna happen out there, but we'll find out. Sort of approaching it with that state of mind means that you can give, you're not gonna be burdened with like, do they think I'm cool? Or that person keeps talking and it's bugging me. It's like, you can kind of try to give them your best self because you're not burdened by all of your inner demons and questioning and stuff like that.
Check. Well, first, thank y'all for presenting and having this discussion. I want to give you all a silver lining. For me, I run a venue space in New York. I've been touring for a while. I'm out here, we're doing shows. And more people that I know are traveling. A bunch of folks who had hit burnout and prior to pandemic who were like, I'm done. No more couches, no more vans, no more people breaking in the car and stealing our equipment while we're gone. And after 2.5 to 3 years of can't leave the house, they're like, Maine, Texas, California. I'm like, over how long a time period? Next 4 months. And it's like, how? I worked, saved money, I quit. And it's like, that's not a plan. And they're like, I know, I'm out. And that's exciting to me. And seeing the when everything burns and the venues aren't reopening, you don't have an option. And it does whittle away the number of people who can do it, but the people who love it, all of a sudden homies are hitting me up like, we have a place for you, stay on the couch. When I came through 3 years ago, it was like, yeah, we got a dog now, and but now people are welcoming it. And through things like Side Door, the technology's there. So I was gonna ask you all, what has changed? Like if you were touring 5 or 10 years ago, or if you were trying to advance a tour 5 or 10 years ago, what technology is available now to help you save money? Cause like for me, only way it works is community. I don't have money to spend, but I know a bunch of people because I hosted them. So when I travel, they host me. and they hook me up with all the free stuff everywhere they are. But let's say you don't have that. I'm also 45, so I've been touring 20 something years. If you're 20, you're 22, you don't know a whole lot of people, what technology is available to you to ease that, like, oh, I booked my place too far away from the venue and now I'm wasting money every day, you know, to you all. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is an obvious moment to plug Side Door, but I will. But I'd love to. Andrew, you looked like you were about to say something.
I recently heard someone route a tour through ChatGPT or whatever. This stuff is free. I mean, like, I think we're just scratching the surface of it, but I literally saw an agent post like, I need to route a 3-month tour with drives no longer than 6 hours that are in these major cities, keeping in mind these things, whatever, and it completely spit out like a perfect routing. So like, I think honestly, we're gonna see this phase where you can use that to be your assistant and second brain. You know, where's the nearest hotel within 2 miles of this venue? Where is the cheapest whatever, you know? I think using those tools, being savvy with spreadsheets is like lame as that sounds. Google Sheets, you can literally do like anything on it if you really think about it. And that is free and in your pocket and can be shared with people. So getting nerdy with that type of stuff, I think can be really effective. Other tools, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think they've always kind of been around. There's just easier to access. Like Google's an incredible tool. Like I could find almost any contact in the world at any venue, any, you know, place, whatever. I could just do it by like sifting through and making sure that I'm, you know, using the right terms to find these things. And like I've done unbelievable shit that way. I reached out to people that I had no business talking to venues that ended up booking many shows for me beyond that, whatever it might be. And it's really just about, it's less about the tools which have kind of existed and are getting easier and cheaper or whatever. And sure, there are certain sites like yours that are just like straight up like engines for stuff. But I think it's more about utilizing these existing tools to track. So like I have a spreadsheet for, you know, radio DJs in Des Moines, whatever. So whenever I go to Des Moines, I know to look up my database of these people. But like, do you actually update it? And like, how detailed is it? And could you search it really easy? Like, these are things that if we get a bit more methodical and nerdy with it, that it could potentially yield results that you couldn't, you know, imagine just by simply tracking it. So I think those are, you know, that's kind of a tool as well as a mindset that I've tapped into a bit more.
I have a very granular answer here. There's a couple things that come to mind. I use Hunter.io to find contacts. So this is you can get a free account on this website. If you know the URL of the person that you're trying to reach, you plug the URL in there. And then it aggregates all of the emails with that domain that exist on the internet. So it can be really helpful if you are, you know, even if that person doesn't come up, you know now how that company formats their email addresses. So that's
like
a great way.
Initial dot last name.
Exactly. It's a great way to reach people like me that hide their email address as much as possible. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this is like totally kind of just a ephemeral cost-saving thing, but if you're traveling internationally, you can have this app that gives you an eSIM for your phone, okay? And it's way less than your roaming plan. This is like, will just save you so much money on tour if you're leaving the country. So I highly recommend looking into that kind of stuff. The one I use is called Airalo, and it's great. I hardly ever use my roaming plan anymore for that. So that's just like a little, you know, traveling cost-saving tidbit.
Are there any Indigenous artists here? Yeah. I mean, well, I guess the cost-saving thing that I didn't really know about was the Jay Treaty of 1764. So if you're an Indigenous artist with a status card, I guess you can use that to live and work on either side of the border. And it was kind of a process. Like I had to kind of get some lawyers. I got invited to play in Buffalo. I had to get all this paperwork and, you know, get my First Nation to write a letter saying, You know, Sandy Lake First Nation demands that you honor the Jay Treaty of 1764 and let Evan come play on the south border. And we just, yeah, you have to get like blood quants and the whole thing. It's kind of a process, but yeah, you can live and work on either side of the border.
That's great.
We've talked about ways to cut costs, whether it's hiring people on Fiverr or what you guys are addressing now. Have you stumbled on or seen with yourselves or anybody in your community any more creative ways to diversify income besides just what you make off the show or merch? I mean, through the pandemic, we were all trying to find ways to live stream or offer experiences, but besides maybe the private lesson or the workshop, have you seen anything out there that is super creative that might help generate some alternative income, maybe on off days or whatever?
Well, I can speak to my own experience. I was spending $120 a month on MailChimp. I've got a mailing list with about 10,000 people on it. And that was like a significant cost. I'm like, it was like every month, I was like, God, I'm spending all this money on this mailing list service. And late last year, I switched everything. I moved it all over to Substack. And now I've got a couple hundred paid subscribers on Substack. So like every month now, my newsletter is earning money instead of costing money. And that was like, now I'm like in my head, I'm like, how can I apply that to everything? Like, how can I take these things that cost me money and make them? So that's like a specific thing, is that like, you may not have a huge audience, but there may be a few people who will like support you. They want you to win. It's not just that they love your music, it's that they want you to win because they love you. And like, something small can be amazing. And you can build something small. I mean, the whole philosophy of Side Door with small, intimate concerts is like, if your footprint cannot be wide, let it be deep. If you can't sell 1,000 tickets, have the most amazing, memorable experience with 40 people. If I could plug Side Door for a second here, the way that it works is very simple. Is artists or hosts can set up a show call, which is sort of like a beacon of their availability in a location and a date range. And then that sends it out to, there's about 7,000 artists on the platform, about 3,000 spaces in North America. And so any of the local hosts there will get like an email saying so-and-so is looking for shows, here's the date range, here's the information. And then you can connect and chat, and then you can build the shows together. You can create a unique revenue split of where the money goes. You put the tickets on sale, and then after the show, everyone gets their cut automatically dispersed from their bank account. So it's a very sort of transparent and friendly and sort of community-driven thing. And most of, like I said this earlier, but most of the hosts on Side Door are taking nothing. Like, if you set up a show on Side Door, and in fact, if you are a South by Southwest artist for the rest of this year, if you set up a show using Side Door and do a show call and go through the steps, we will like put $500 into your show settlement on top of the ticket sales, just to try and like encourage people to use it. So that's a good way to set up some shows and make some money. But basically, I mean, cutting costs and making money, like that's you were saying, like, how can we generate more revenue? You can, within the model of the show itself, if you can use alternative hosts that don't have the costs that a venue does, rather than getting paid in beer tickets, you can get paid actual legitimate money. And that's kind of what Side Door is all about.
Yeah, well, we're on the topic of Side Door. Well, I have a silver lining and a question. So my silver lining is during COVID, we turned the bus, like my band and I, we turned the bus into a mobile stage. And so we keep like the drum and all the equipment inside. And so we're able to set up in under 10 minutes and do like a full gig. And so I was wondering if that is something that Side Door would be, like we would be able to do that like with Side Door, or the venue's mostly all indoors. I've never used it before. I'm from Canada, and I'm just out here. My other silver lining is there is a bed in my bus, and so if anybody wants to be on the road cheaply, that's the way to do it.
Put a mattress in the van. It's the sort of roaming venue. Absolutely, like there's room for you on Side Door. We could, you should definitely reach out and we should talk. I love the idea. The venues tend to be indoor or outdoor. There's no one way. We've got like we've got like parks, like we've got campsites on side door.
Oh, cool.
But I mean, that's the kind of ingenuity, right? Like, I think that like at the heart of it, if I could just say like one thing to any artist in the room is like, you want this to be your job. It's art, and it's, you know, and there's like, there needs to be some kind of line between the art and the business of it. So work on the art, make sure the art is amazing, keep getting better at the art, keep getting better at writing songs, get better at performing, work on the art. And then imagine you just opened a cafe, and this cafe is gonna fail unless you spend 14 hours a day there, you know, making sure the font on the menu looks cool and that you, like, your seats aren't broken, and, you know, you're sourcing good baked goods or something. Like, what you're doing, like using your skills, your craft, you know, craftsmanship, all that stuff, your time, your energy, your money, and you're investing in what you're doing. You're building a mobile stage with a bed on it. You can now tour anywhere with like minimal costs, right? That's the kind of ingenuity that will like give you a life in art. Maybe you will be a huge band, maybe you won't, but you will have a life in art, and you will probably be fulfilled if you can kind of just reinvest in what you're doing all the time. And think about it like a business. You want this to be your job? Think about it like a job. Yeah.
Hey everybody, really insightful panel. Thank you guys for your time. In regard to, you were speaking about like making sense of your data. Like, yes, Google Sheets is a powerful and free tool, but what exists, I don't know if it's in the form of like templates or whatever, that can actually help you make sense of your data. A lot of artists, whether it be musical, traveling comedians, whether it's people who are trying to do travel presentations, like mobile, like TED Talk type vibes, how do you make sense of the data that you've collected? Like, oh, this person may have attended the show here, and here. But like me, I can't think of that. But if there's a database now, it's not just a database, it's a how to connect the dots. Anything like that exists, as well as maybe apps to help you get in contact with venue managers in different cities. When you're like, hey, yeah, Chat GPT told me this would be a cool tour with me. I'm like, all right, cool. How do I actually get in contact with people who are out here? And then when I get to those places, make sense of the data I collect. I yield my time.
I mean, there's plenty of applications out there where you can onboard your credentials to whatever site, and then it synthesizes it in a way that feels a bit more visual. There's a website that costs money called Chartmetric. So that one kind of like turns it into a bit more like palatable and understandable information. And there's a couple of them out there. I don't know any off the top of my head, but like that you can, it basically, you can plug in your stuff. I would also say too, like going back to kind of the Fiverr thing, it's like, could you pay someone $40 to synthesize your stuff into a report, you know, and lay out, or maybe monthly they spit out a report for you? And there's people out there, it's like, what music is playing to you, accounting is to this person, you know, and you can pay them a small amount of money to work out this information, whatever it might be, into a way that feels a bit more understandable to you. And in regards to reaching out to promoters and stuff, there's a bunch of paid tools out there. I joined Polestar, which costs $600 a year, but hopefully you can make that back in a gig or two. And that's like a very comprehensive database. There's a bunch of those out there. And then again, like being crafty with Google, using these websites that allow you to auto-populate. LinkedIn has been like a huge thing for me too. It's still, I feel relatively untapped, which is nuts. I know we're probably all on it thinking about it, but like, I can't tell you how many times I've found contacts through people by looking up the company on LinkedIn, finding out what that job title is, and then filling in the blanks on an email. And like, I still do that stuff and cold reach out to people. And I've messaged them on LinkedIn and they've responded as well. So like, you know, these, even though it sometimes seems untouchable and it might take 6 emails, ultimately we're all doing this because we're in the business of like booking shows or finding artists or whatever. It's just about like, you know, shots on goal and eventually landing one, you know? Hopefully that was helpful.
Mine's more of a comment, and I'm not sure if you touched on this because I got here a couple minutes late, but when I came to South by for the first time, I packed 5 singer-songwriters in a van and we shared all the costs and we played shows all the way down here. And I think touring with friends, you know, if you're worried about losing money, you split the cost of the hotel, you split the cost of the gas. Like, yes, maybe the revenue's a little less, but I do think that audiences I think everyone is kind of strapped right now. So if they're going to see 2 artists for the same price as maybe going to one show, like there's just something there as well. And I guess I'll also say, like, I'm not sure if the expectation has become that it should be easy to get shows, but it's like so many emails and so many, it's totally normal to feel like you're kind of banging your head against the wall. And eventually these little things kind of start, you know, peeking through. And I just want to encourage everyone to find artist friends and stick together on that stuff.
Community will take you so far.
There has been a theme
about community during this talk, and I know it's like nebulous and it can feel like a buzzword sometimes, but like that is the stuff that makes it worth it. That is the stuff that can sometimes pay the bills. I can pitch my artist all I want through the official pathways, but my artist can DM somebody who's a true fan, and that's what gets them on the tour. You know, I've seen it many times. The relationship I have with this person, yeah, you have the numbers, they're still not interested in working with you. It's because you're cool, or you met at an event, or like you've hung out 5 times before, and then you're hitting them up to utilize something that they do. And that just starts from authentic community building and authentic connection, which is like truly why I think we're doing it, you know?
Hey, so thanks so much for hosting this panel. It's been really cool to learn from you guys. My name's Christopher. I'm just a data science student who really loves music and concerts.
Data science student, yeah, there you go.
My question's for Andrew specifically. I went to a tour that was run by Red Light Management in this past year, and I really enjoyed it, so thanks for that. But also you mentioned that you think data is very important in the space and very powerful, but Peggy also mentioned that there's metrics like streams where someone's getting 1 million streams but only had 5 tickets sold to their shows. Is there a way or an algorithm that your management company is implementing to convert different metrics like streams versus t-shirt sales to root out where you should tour?
I wish there was like a super official thing that we like put a link through and then it spits out legitimate or not. To be quite honest, after doing it a while, it is a gut check type of thing. And ways like true engagement on socials, like not just, bots or like whatever, but like actually people sharing, like taking that time. There's this new level of like passive listener, right? You found it on this playlist. You ask someone what type of music they listen to, or who's your favorite artist? I don't know. I listen to this playlist. It's like very passive. So that additional layer is by going to some of these other places and doing a bit of recon work and looking at engagement, looking at how often that they're touring, looking at their tagged photos, looking at their Shazam count. These are like the extra step beyond the passive listener or the TikTok follow button of like, what are they doing additionally to show if they actually have real fandom? And then it's up to the artist team to think about, how do I get these people to that place? Like, what a beautiful gift that I was anointed by the Spotify gods. Got a shitload of playlisting, like very cool. How are you going to turn these people into proper, or to real fans that buy tickets, that are in your community, etc.? And so like, those are the type of places that I look at. I actually work with an entity that books other artists to collaborate with them. They're an orchestra in Miami called New Deco Ensemble. So I'm constantly reaching out to artists who like, yeah, you have 10 million streams on Spotify, but you can't sell a ticket in South Florida for the life of you. So like, I'm looking at their numbers, I'm looking at their engagement, I'm looking at recent news articles, I'm looking at the rounded out pie. Like, are you putting in the effort across the board, or did you just get lucky on Spotify and get on all these playlists? And so to me, that is kind of a gut check and vibe check. And you can usually tell, like, did you pay for these streams? Like, are you more engaged just on this one platform, whatever? And it's looking at the holistic picture and seeing how that might translate. And even still, sometimes it doesn't mean, anything. It's just like, it's, and then there's those intangibles of like a great story and music that moves you, and maybe you're a queer artist that's drumming up like the queer community, whatever it is. Like, there's those angles too. I wish there was like some sort of like, smell test thing that I could just put it in, but like, that's to me the stuff that I look for.
I just want to add, we can all smell BS. Like if somebody has like 150,000 Instagram followers and every one of their posts has like 2 comments that are clearly bots, like we know that that's garbage. I would say forever, something that is small but like real is better than something that is big and full of crap. And so like, when you see someone who's got like 6,000 Instagram followers, but like every post has like a bunch of engagement, people commenting, and like that tells you that that person is doing something real that is affecting other people, that is like, causing some kind of existential respite in the people who like them, and that is meaningful, and that can grow. Like that's something that's real, that can actually grow. And so just always tapping into like, remember the human, be the human, and the data is so important. These days, especially, and when routing tours, and Spotify tells you where your biggest listenerships are and stuff like that. And when you go there and when you play the show, like tap into that community. If you can manage it, be like Aysanabee and go to the merch table after, like go and talk to these people. They will remember you, they will look you in the eyes, and they will love you, and then they will come back and they will bring a friend because they will actually be invested. And that means like, that's everything. And then, when you look at the people who have built these massive followings, it's because they've been really effective at doing that. Like everything from Insane Clown Posse to like the Swifties to BTS or whatever, like the huge stuff, like these people, they're doing it on a massive scale that most people can't even really comprehend. But that's what they're doing. They're making people feel invited into a community where they feel seen and heard and understood. And that's why those people love, they love Taylor Swift's music, but they love her. And that is crucial. Okay, thank you so much, guys. Thanks for the great questions. Thanks for coming.